Did you know that in Scream 4, when Sidney and Kate try to exit the house through the patio doors, the reflection of Ghostface they see in the wind chimes doesn't actually belong to either of the film's killers? Keep watching to find out who this actually is and more as we go over 30 mind-blowing facts you never knew about Ghostface. What is up, Scream team? Zach Cherry here, and if you're as obsessed with horror movies as I am, you might want to consider hitting that subscribe button and turning on those bell notifications, setting them to all. That way you can stay up to date with all my latest content. Just a warning, we will be discussing the first 4 films of the Scream franchise, as well as the 3rd season of the television series, so be mindful of spoilers if you haven't seen any of them. Having said that, do me a favor and toss this video a thumbs up, and be sure to meet me in the comments down below to let me know about any additional Ghostface tidbits you think I might have left out. Let's get into it. Although it's a common fact that Kevin Williamson had written Scream as a love letter to the horror genre, it was actually upon hearing about the real-life story of the Gainesville Ripper which had chilled him to the bone and initially inspired him to put pen to paper. Attracting widespread media attention in August of 1990, the serial killer, also known as Daniel Harold Rowling, murdered 5 students in Gainesville, Florida after breaking into their apartments in the early morning hours while they were still asleep. Having nightmares about the killings, Williamson would put his mind at ease by calling up his friend who, rather than calming him down, would tease him by telling him things like Michael or Jason was in the house coming to kill him, hence a screenplay was born. The Ghostface mask was developed by Bridget Slayerton for the costume company Funworld in 1991 as part of their series called Fantastic Faces. Ironically, the mask was inspired by the Edvard Munch painting The Scream, as well as the album cover for Pink Floyd's The Wall and the ghost version of Coco the Clown, who had appeared in Betty Boop cartoons in the 1930s. Its original product variant was only known as the Peanut-Eyed Ghost, named for its thin, curved eye sockets, before Funworld licensing director R.J. Torbert changed the name to Ghostface prior to the release of Scream in 1996. Kevin Williamson's screenplay had only ever specified the film's villain as the Masked Killer, giving the props department a very nondescript idea for what the mask would look like. K&B had played around with multiple design sketches, varying from deformed faces to monstrous visages riddled with fangs, but it wasn't until Scream's producer, Marianne Maddalena, had discovered the Funworld mask in a Sonoma Valley home while scouting locations for the film. K&B eventually made a replica of the mask, which was used in several scenes during early stages of production, until Dimension Films made a deal with Funworld for the rights to use the mask in the movie. You can still notice the K&B variant if you look closely, as it appears during the death scenes of both Casey Becker as well as Principal Himbry. While originally the Ghostface costume had only ever included the mask, the film's crew had envisioned an all-white design to more closely appear as a ghost-like figure. This was eventually nixed when it became apparent that the design would be too similar in appearance to a Ku Klux Klan robe, and it was decided that they would use black fabric instead, as the contrast would also help to highlight the details of the mask. Before the killer was referred to as Ghostface inside the Scream universe, an early scene shows us that the costume was actually labeled as Father Death. This was done to further push Neil Prescott, Sidney's father, as a red herring, but it's also the only time the costume is ever given this name. In fact, it wasn't until Scream 4 that characters started to refer to the costumed persona as Ghostface, as prior to this, the film's characters only ever referred to them as the killer, with the exception of Tatum, who does use the term Mr. Ghostface.
Please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface.
Similar to the other big name slashers of the horror genre, Ghostface has a signature weapon which is completely unique to them, as they're always equipped with a Buck 120 hunting knife. However, unlike their peers, Ghostface has never shown very much versatility or inventiveness when it comes to their actual kills. There are some exceptions, however, they more often than not seem to take a traditionalist approach, opting for simple slices and stabs, while never really picking up any other weapon, unless it's a police-issued firearm. As of this recording, prior to the release of the 5th Scream movie, there have been a total of 10 killers to don the Ghostface persona across the film franchise, television series, and game tie-ins. Billy Loomis and Stu Macher in Scream, Mickey Altieri and Mrs. Loomis in Scream 2, Roman Bridger in Scream 3, Charlie Walker and Jill Roberts in Scream 4, Jamal J. Elliott and Beth in Scream Season 3, and also Danny Johnson, aka Jed Olsen in Dead by Daylight, who acts as sort of an evil version of Peter Parker, as he's a newspaper journalist who covers stories about the crimes committed as his alter ego. There are 3 additional killers who appear throughout the first 2 seasons of the Scream television series, however, they're not officially linked to the Ghostface persona, as they were instead known as the Lakewood Slasher and given a much different character design featuring a surgical mask and rain poncho. The infamous Ghostface voice has been provided by Roger Jackson across all media since the original film, with the exception of Dead by Daylight, where Ghostface is voiced by Philip Ivanovic. Jackson did, however, provide the voice for Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, in which Ghostface does appear as a playable operator. While the voice is mostly ever heard over the telephone, there are 3 occasions where it's spoken by Ghostface from behind the mask. Twice in Scream 2 by Mickey when he's about to attack Sidney at the sorority, and again before he reveals himself, and in Scream 3 by Roman before his unmasking as well. As we see during Mickey's unmasking, the voice modulator fits inside the chin of the mask, giving the killer the ability to use it hands-free. Billy and Stu also use the device to taunt Sidney after the reveal, but the sound is much more distorted as it overlaps with their actual voices.
What's the matter, Sidney? You look like you've seen a ghost.
Speaking of the voice of Ghostface, the ringing of the telephone has become the proverbial death knell of the Scream movies, since other than Sidney and that one time the killer called Dewey disguising their voice, every single person to have ever picked up one of Ghostface's calls has almost immediately met a grisly end. Currently, with the phone calls depicted in the Stab movies notwithstanding, Scream 4 holds the record for the highest amount of calls placed by the killer, with 10 in total, which does include the call Jill made to Olivia, which had acted as a signal for Charlie to call Kirby. Conversely, Scream 2 contains the least amount of phone calls with a scant total of 5, 3 of which were made to Cece at the Omega Beta Zeta house alone. Reportedly, several big-name actors came very close to playing the characters who would eventually go on to be revealed as the film's killers. And whether they got far in the casting process or flat out rejected the role completely, we could have seen some very different faces, offering up some uniquely different performances. For instance, Tobey Maguire was said to have been offered the role of Mickey Altieri in Scream 2, while Benicio del Toro was considered for the role of Roman Bridger in Scream 3. For the role of Jill Roberts, Scout Taylor Compton was one name considered after having just finished her run as Laurie Strode in the Rob Zombie Halloweens, as well as Selena Gomez, whose name would come up again years later amidst speculation of the casting for Scream 5. Despite being the most recognizable face of the Scream franchise, Ghostface did not actually appear on any North American posters or home media releases until the debut of Scream 4 in 2011. Further to this, out of all the characters featured on the franchise's film posters, the only ones who were eventually revealed to be Ghostface are Billy on the poster for Scream and Jill on the poster for Scream 4. This will likely change for the release of the new film, as one poster features the entire cast with a tagline that states "The killer is on this poster." The marketing for Scream 2022's "It's Always Someone You Know" is similar to the promo used for Season 2 of the Scream television series, teasing one of its major characters as the killer. But its origins go back quite a bit further, as this was a marketing campaign that was first used on the television series Nip Tuck back in 2005 for its Season 3 finale. During the promo, the show teased audiences that one of the main characters would be revealed as the serial killer known as the Carver, a white masked figure who had terrorized the city of Miami in a murder mystery plot that had spanned the course of the show's second and third seasons. However, in regard regards to all the ghost faces throughout the Scream films, the tagline is a bit of a fallacy, as the killer has actually been shown to not always be someone you know. In fact, Scream 3's Roman Bridger reveals himself to a bewildered Sidney Prescott, who he had not only shared 0 scenes with prior to his unmasking, but also made a point to have this be their very first encounter, despite the fact that they were long-lost siblings. So perhaps the tagline should more aptly be "the killer is always someone connected to you," since each film has had at least one killer who has a motive against Sidney, while any accomplice Ghostface is simply just there for the thrill of the kill. Speaking of taglines, this saying usually rings true for just about every one of the Scream movies. I mean, outside of the 3 main cast members, the potentiality of a character turning out to be Ghostface is pretty much guaranteed until the moment they're killed off. However, just because a character is dead doesn't always mean they're not the killer, as both Billy and Roman did indeed fake their deaths in their respective films, allowing for us to forget all about them by the time we got to the climax. And while we can't always predict if a death is actually authentic or not, we should probably be a little suspicious if it occurs off-screen or as part of an elaborate spectacle that takes place in front of another character. Early drafts of Scream 3's script had actually planned for there to be 2 killers, as Angelina was eventually revealed as Roman's accomplice and girlfriend after having also faked her death much earlier in the film. Certain scenes in the script had even placed both costumed ghost faces in the same room at the same time, which would have been the only instance in the franchise where it was made clear to the characters and audience that they were indeed dealing with 2 killers. In a disturbing twist, it was revealed that Roman not only got some sort of incestuous charge out of sleeping with the actress who was playing his real-life sister, but also that the woman had been a figure from Sidney's past, as we find out that she used to go by the name of Angie Crick when she attended Woodsboro High. Producers eventually decided that the reveal of a second killer was not only too much of a plot dump, but was also a tad bit cringy for its implications of a sexual obsession Roman had with Sidney, and so the idea was scrapped altogether. Speaking of Roman, it is widely theorized by fans that he had previously appeared in the original Scream as the 3rd killer working alongside Billy and Stu, where he was possibly the ghost face who attacked Sidney in the school washroom and later on seen stalking her around town. This is a misconception which is unequivocally not true, as the scenario had even been made clear by Roman himself during his exposition to Sidney in the 3rd movie. As indicated here, he plainly states that he had no idea the 2 would go on to plan a murder spree, as his only involvement was 1 year prior, when he motivated Billy to kill Maureen Prescott. In fact, it's implied that he had likely never met Stu on account that he had suggested that Billy find a partner to sell out in case he got caught. This was also evident in Stu's complete surprise that Billy's motive was driven by Maureen's affair with his father, further proving that Stu was unaware of Roman's existence. On top of that, Kevin Williamson didn't actually write the script for the 3rd movie, as Aaron Kruger had come aboard the franchise and retconned the original, meaning that there's no way any of Roman's storyline could have been premeditated. Another misconception fans have is that Billy acted alone while murdering Casey and Steve based on Tatum providing Stu with an alibi the following day. However, this is generally based on her line being misquoted as saying Stu was with me all night, when in fact she says Stu was with me last night, not actually specifying a time frame.
Stu was with me last night, okay?
Yeah, it was.
Randy even brings up a very valid point by questioning if it was before or after the murders. If you pay close attention to the opening scene, it becomes quite apparent that both killers had to be present as they were each stationed at different entranceways to the house. This was done to increase their chances of preventing Casey from getting away, as well as posing another trick question by revealing that a killer would be waiting for her at either door. This is made further evident when, after breaking in through the patio doors, one killer runs directly to the front entrance where they unlock the door to let the other killer in. This explains why minutes later, when the parents arrive home, they find the front door to be open, despite it being deadbolted when we last saw it. Although Casey and Steve's murders appear to be entirely incidental to the rest of the film, that's not exactly the case. Sure, Stu has motive for wanting to kill Casey, as she had dumped him the previous school year. However, as revealed by the fact that Casey had sat sat next to Sydney in English class, her murder was most likely a deliberate attempt to rattle Sydney's cage early on, and since the two killers were framing the entire plot as a real-life horror movie, it would make sense to commit a murder that they knew would indirectly affect their main target. Some people have also theorized that Casey and Steve's murder was a practice round of sorts in order to psych themselves up for the big event, but that's also not really the case since that was kind of the whole purpose of their killing of Maureen Prescott, which they had already done 1 year earlier. Speaking of Maureen's murder, it's well established that Sydney wrongly accused Cotton Weary of the crime, as she named him as the person leaving the house the night it happened. Gail appropriately deduces that Sydney was mistaken as she saw somebody else leaving the house that night wearing Cotton's coat in an effort to frame him. Seeing as how Sydney would have only seen the mystery killer from behind, it's likely that the identity of the person she saw belonged to Billy, since he and Cotton do seem to have a similar hairstyle as we see in the video footage during Cotton's trial, meaning that Billy had actually snuck into Sydney's house on more than one occasion. However, Cotton seems to be the only exception of a suspect who was arrested or brought in for questioning that doesn't turn out to be Ghostface, since the only two other people in the franchise to have been pegged as the killer early on did eventually turn out to be guilty. Billy's visit to Sydney's house early in the film is an intentional part of the plan, as he's there to distract Sydney while Stu presumably sneaks in through another window to abduct her father. This explains why Billy turns on the stereo to play Don't Fear the Reaper, as it drowns out any noise that might potentially be heard during a scuffle in the other room.
Yeah. Was edited for TV.
Neil's abduction in this scene is further made evident to us by the fact that he's still wearing the same outfit 2 nights later, despite the fact that he told Sydney he was about to go to bed. Not only does this offer proof that Stu was also with Billy that night, despite Tatum's claim, but just goes to show how layered their plan was, as on the surface, this scene would otherwise appear to be pretty innocuous. Despite the fact that their characters are revealed as the killers, the actors who portray them are not actually underneath the Ghostface mask every time they show up on screen. Instead, an assortment of stunt performers will don the costume to do all the heavy lifting in chase scenes, with Dane Farwell primarily appearing as Ghostface in Screams 1, 2, and 4, and Brian Avery stepping into the role in Scream 3. Chris Durand, who played Michael Myers in Halloween H2O, also briefly donned the costume in Scream 2, but regardless of these stunt performers being upwards of 6 feet tall, it's made to be understood that they are still portraying the film's corresponding villains, even if they are a petite 5'2" teenaged girl. There are some notable exceptions, like Skeet Ulrich being allowed to wear the costume while the killer hovered over Randy, even though this would have been Stu at the time, and Wes Craven, who appeared as the killer when Casey had hit him in the face with a phone. Otherwise, the only instances where we see a character in the full Ghostface costume is when Sydney wears it before attacking Billy from behind the closet, or during any of the killer's eventual unmaskings. To date, Mickey, Roman, and Jill are the only Ghostfaces to reveal their identities this way, as all of the other killers in either the movies or the 3rd season of the television show instead revealed their identities by way of confession. The identity of Scream 2's killers became a huge dilemma during the film's production after an extra on set got a hold of the script, which they leaked onto the internet. Originally, in addition to Mrs. Loomis, her accomplices were revealed to be both Derek and Hallie, with Cotton Weary also showing up with his own murderous agenda separate from the others. This was changed in rewrites to have Cotton instead save the day, while Hallie was now removed as a killer altogether, and Derek's spot was switched with Mickey, who had originally received a death scene similar to Derek's. On top of all that, other plans for the film included an additional Ghostface killer who would have set up a cliffhanger to bring us into the 3rd movie. This would have occurred right before the end credits, where after Sydney began to walk away from the media circus, we would have spotted the mysterious killer watching her from atop the school's bell tower. The subsequent sequel productions also played around with the idea of different killers, as Scream 3 at one point had Detective Wallace in mind, while early stages of Scream 4 would have seen either Trevor or Deputy Haas in place of the role ultimately filled by Charlie. Although she uses the alias of Debbie Salt, which she later admits is a made-up identity, Mrs. Loomis is never given a proper first name in the canon of the franchise, leading many to confuse her actual name as Debbie Loomis. However, in Kevin Williamson's original screenplay, it was indicated that her actual full legal name was Nancy Loomis, as a direct homage to the actress who had played Annie Brackett in the original Halloween. This was later confirmed in an early draft for Scream 4, in which one of the trivia questions given to Kirby asks her to name the killers in the Stab franchise. Seeing as how Stab 2 is based off of the events in Scream 2, Kirby declares that the name of the killer is Debbie Salt, aka Nancy Loomis. A deleted scene in Scream 2 establishes that Chief Hartley had revealed information during the campus press conference in which it was forensically deduced that the killer was left-handed.
And from the angle of the knife wounds, they know the killer's left-handed.
The characters then point out that both Mickey and Hallie do indeed use their left hands, setting up that one of them could be revealed as the killer later on. This fact is further validated throughout the film, as we do see the killer always holding their knife in the left hand. However, this potentially creates a paradox in the fact that Mrs. Loomis does admit to killing Randy, which was also done with the left hand, as seen here in this shot. This is easily explained though, as Mrs. Loomis also states that everything she's done is traceable back to Mickey, suggesting that she would have stabbed Randy with the knife in her left hand to have the wounds be consistent with all of the other victims. After Kevin Williamson finished his work on the first two Scream movies, his star power quickly rose, and he soon found himself in high demand, signing on to multiple new projects. That became a hindrance for Scream's producers, as they wanted to rush a third film into production and were unable to retain him, as he now had other contractual obligations. He did, however, have enough time to write and sell them a 30-page story outline, which was quickly greenlit and almost made its way to pre-production. The story would have involved Sidney returning to Woodsboro following a string of new murders, where the final act would have culminated with the supposedly dead bodies of all the victims rising up in front of her, revealing themselves to be part of a large cult of Ghostface killers. In an even further plot twist, it would have been revealed that the entire plot had been organized by Stu Mocker, who, as it turned out, did not die from his injuries in the original and was serving a life sentence in prison where he had amassed a following of psychotic proteges. Whether or not that means Stu is still alive in the headcanon of his creator, giving way to a potential return in a future film, Matthew Lillard did already return to the franchise once before, where he made a cameo appearance in Scream 2, playing a background extra during the Delta Lambda sorority party. A large portion of Scream 3's first act revolves around Ghostface trying to track down Sidney. We see this in their attempt to extract the information from Cotton, and also by learning that someone had broken into the Woodsboro Police Department where they had attempted to steal her file. And while it's not very likely that Cotton would have any communication with Sidney, as they weren't exactly friends, and we know from her speed dial that Dewey and her father are the only people she talks to, so it stands to reason that by the time Ghostface does eventually call her at the 36-minute mark, no part of the story's progression would really suggest that the killer had gotten any closer to finding out what her phone number was. Of course, this lazy writing is probably due to the fact that Scream 3 was made up on the fly, but there's kind of no way around this one. They done fucked up. At about the 68-minute mark in Scream 4, when Sidney and Kate try to exit the house through the back door, Sidney sees the reflection of Ghostface in the wind chimes, who appears to be moving towards them. This causes the two to make a run for the front door instead, where they bump into a second Ghostface, who is ultimately able to stab Kate through the mailbox slot. This set piece would seem to suggest the involvement of both killers on the scene at the same time, as one would be stationed at the back door while the other was at the front. However, in a bit from an earlier draft of the script that was either removed or not made entirely clear to us in the finished film, it's revealed that the Ghostface stationed at the back of the house is actually not a person at all, but rather some clever subterfuge used by the killer to lure their victims into a trap. Originally, after Kate dies, Sidney was to have doubled back to the patio entrance, where she would have stumbled over a dummy Ghostface costume that had been strung up to dance around in the wind, thus giving us the earlier impression that the killer was standing at the back door. An interesting aspect of the Scream movies is that each Ghostface killer is was never technically figured out by the other characters. Sure, people correctly guess who it might be or pick up on clues after their reveals have already been made aware to the audience, but in typical Ghostface fashion, the killer will reveal their identity when they're ready to. This calls attention to this franchise's absence of a well-worn murder mystery staple in which a character will stumble upon the identity of the murderer early on in the story, only for them to be killed before they can share the news with anyone else. This means that every single victim of Ghostface is unfortunately killed without having the luxury of knowing who it was that did them in. There's obviously the exception of the characters who are murdered after Ghostface has revealed themselves, but the one and only time where this trope can be found otherwise is with Casey Becker. As the second proper victim of the first movie, she's the only person across any of these 4 films who got to know the identity of Ghostface long before anyone else, and sadly took that information to the grave. No villainous plot would be complete unless you had someone to frame for the crime, and each Ghostface killer takes a unique approach with who they plan on being the fall person. Billy and Stu, having already framed Cotton Weary, set their sights on Neil Prescott for their 1996 killing spree, planning to have it appear as though he killed Sydney in an apparent murder-suicide. Mrs. Loomis takes a more practical approach by setting up her accomplice while she secretly plans to disappear. Roman's scheme, which seems to rely on a conflicting combination of fastidious planning and chance, is all about making Sydney appear to have a psychotic breakdown. And Charlie thinks he and Jill are setting up Trevor, while Jill herself, unbeknownst to Charlie, is setting him up to take the fall as Trevor's partner. Mickey, who Wes Craven had likened to the Shakespearean character Iago for his manipulative treachery, is the only killer who's happy to take full credit for his crimes, possibly making him the most psychotic of the lot. Each of our villains plays a very specific role in the plot. Some take turns making the phone calls, others are primarily responsible for committing the murders, but since it's never made entirely clear as to who does what as their identities are concealed by the Ghostface mask, it's left up to our own detective skills to figure out how it all played out. Fortunately, I've done all the work for you, which can be found in this playlist here, where I've broken down who killed who to the best of my ability within all 4 films across the entire Scream franchise. However, with those findings notwithstanding, it can still be determined beyond a shadow of a doubt that Roman Bridger is indeed the Ghostface with the highest kill count, seeing as how it's established that he did act alone throughout Scream 3, where there were 9 deaths accounted for in total. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the Ghostface with the distinction of having the lowest kill count is going to be Mrs. Loomis with her one and only kill of Randy Meeks. If you ask me though, one Randy kill is still worth more than the entire ensemble of Stab 3's cast, so in that regard, she's definitely not doing terrible. Unlike Michael, Jason, and Freddy, Ghostface is not actually a supernatural being and will eventually succumb to any sort of mortal wound that's been inflicted upon them. However, if you want to take Ghostface down and make sure that they stay down, the most tried and true method is a bullet, preferably one shot between the eyes. This worked on 5 of the 7 film Ghostfaces with Billy, Mrs. Loomis, Mickey, Roman, and Jill, but if you happen to find yourself in a pinch, you can always take advantage of your surroundings. For instance, dropping an old box TV onto their head, like we see here with Stu. Even if all else fails, the other method might simply be to just hang back and let the alpha take out the beta, as it's sort of become a pattern at this point that one Ghostface will inevitably turn on the other. But that's also contingent on whether or not the cliche rings true, in which the killer always comes back for one last scare, as we're shown that neither Charlie or Stu recover from their injuries, and Mrs. Loomis never even gets the opportunity. Having said all that, Sydney currently holds the record for the most Ghostface kills, with 3 committed all by herself, plus 1 collaborative effort made with Gale. Both Cotton and Dewey also have 1 kill under their belt each, as well as Jill, who probably would have had better luck had she let Charlie kill Sydney before eventually killing him herself. If you guys are just as hyped for the new Scream movie and want to check out some more trivia, you can click on either one of these playlists for more related content. Until next time, I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.